Welcome to Wednesday's Secular Soapbox Day here on the Skeptic Haven Network. I'm your host, Mike Wiseman. Today's topic is church scandals. As always, I'll be joined by my favorite co-host, Apostacie. Today's special guest is going to be Tim Whitaker. Let's start the show. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming on. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. By the way, great intro. I mean, so cool.
I appreciate that. I didn't trip over myself this time. It's a
you
thing.
did great.
It's awesome.
Well, even your little video graphic was really cool, too. I was like, oh, this is high tech. You guys are legit.
Yeah.
Spare no expense here.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what you do, Tim.
Yeah, my name is Tim Whitaker. I'm the creator and facilitator of the New Evangelicals. We exist primarily for folks marginalized by the evangelical church, and we hold space for them. We advocate for accountability inside of evangelical spaces, and we help people explore outside of the basement of evangelical fundamentalism and into the room and the house of the Christian tradition on a broader scale. So that's kind of what we do. We are Jesus-centered and fully inclusive.
Gotcha. So Christian.
Yes.
Gotcha. As believer, we'll get into that, of course, a little bit later. I'm
Absolutely.
sure at some point I'll jump in there. Tell us about church scandals. How did you get into that?
Well, I didn't mean to get into it. I grew up homeschooled and deeply embedded in evangelical spaces. Always was and committed to the way of Jesus as best as I knew how. I believe that following Jesus was loving your neighbor, and you read the Gospels, and he's pretty clear in a lot of things. Take care of the poor and advocate for liberation. And when I started New Evangelicals for a lot of reasons about a year and a half ago, this other side, the underbelly of evangelicalism, kind of opened up to me. And I realized that people were finding us on Instagram, sharing their stories of serious church hurt from both prominent and also smaller no-name churches. And that kind of got me, by nature of the work that I do, I had to keep track of at least some of it. I mean, it's impossible for one person to know all of it. But, I realized very quickly, like, evangelicalism in America has some major problems, and church scandals are really rampant, and there's no accountability, which is really the problem.
True. Yeah. The ones who are supposed to be held accountable are the ones actually doing it all.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Policing themselves. Is that what it's called? I think it's called policing themselves. Yeah. It didn't really work out so well. Do you have a favorite scandal?
I mean, I'm not sure if I would use the term favorite for me.
Well,
I think that there are scandals that are so shockingly horrible, and how the leaders are still in power really blows my mind. Two come to mind. First is Mark Driscoll, who literally has an entire podcast devoted to unpacking the abuse and harm that he did. And he's still teaching as a lead pastor and still welcomed in evangelical spaces. One example of this is Gateway Church. I think it's the second largest church in America. Robert Morris, who was on Trump's advisory team, is a big fan of Driscoll, has had Driscoll speak at his church recently with really about a year ago. He did a conference and had Mark there. So that one really blows me away as far as, like, guys, we have so many receipts, including Mark's own words. And the evangelical machine's like, well, we don't, I can't say I love Mark, but they tolerate him at a minimum, and some actually love him. And the other one I would share is, I'm not sure, for the audience, how familiar they are with evangelical spaces, but there is a well-known, and I'm sure one of you at least will know this person, John Macarthur, a very popular, I would argue he's kind of like the poster boy for evangelical pastoring. He has cross-denominational lines. He's written dozens of books, his own biblical commentary. He really built an empire. And maybe about 6-7 months ago, a great news reporter, Julie Roys, broke not one, not two, but 3 separate stories that the church John Macarthur leads hired throughout its history 3 different men who were pedophiles, 2 of which molested their own children. And Julie's very thorough. Receipts, emails, eyewitness. One of the men is in jail for what he did. And John and never responded. He never addressed the allegations, which on a biblical level, if we're going to say that language, really is problematic for a lot of reasons, even by fundamentalist standards.
Yeah.
But the community around him, the people who are telling me still groomers are in schools, still rally around John Macarthur. And that was another one where I'm just like, I am just blown away. I mean, the children are saying what happened to them. It's heartbreaking stuff. So I think those are my two top tier of just like, I'm still shocked today, even though I've covered both of those things extensively.
Yeah. I have to say that John Macarthur scandal, I think it was in March when Julie first uncovered that one and it went viral. And I remember I was already out of the church, but I was shocked by it. I shouldn't be shocked, but I was still shocked because I looked up to John Macarthur at one point and I was disgusted. And I have a lot of, I had a few friends still on my social media who were quite big John Macarthur fans. And I was just waiting for them to say something. And it was like crickets. And that was just disgusting to me that nobody, and then I would look at a few people who were huge fans and they were in a roundabout way defending him and sticking up for him. And he always sends his speaker boy, Phil Johnson, to do his, sweeping up his messes. And
Yeah, and I because of the work that we do, we're kind of we're able to have a foot in that world, even though we critique it heavily. And I still talk to a few people who are very fundamentalist in DMs, and I've asked them like, "Hey, John Macarthur, this is clear cut," and they usually give excuses. Well, I'm not sure the full story. I don't really know what happened. And I'm like, guys, we have articles, we have the receipts. It's on you to read and understand what happened. So even seeing how a lot of those folks I've interacted with have, I think, a cognitive dissonance there. Yeah, we're like, well, I don't know if I can trust the source. It's like the kids who said that they were molested, those kids, it is shocking to me, frankly.
Yes. And do you find that the people who, like the friends of mine that would respect John Macarthur, they would be absolutely, they would be disgusted with Mark Driscoll and everyone else, but they would come to the defense of John Macarthur. So they would be like pointing fingers at one and say, okay, what he did is bad, but then be like, oh, but John Macarthur, he gets a pass. Do you find, I would find that a lot.
I would
in the Reformed community.
What I will say is this. It has not been my experience to see a whole lot of that. What I have seen is a lot of tolerance. Yeah, I don't like Mark either. He's really a bully. But it's not my church. And one thing I want to point out maybe to the audience and to you two, again, I'm not sure how deeply embedded the audience is into this world, but back in the day, there was a Christian author named Rob Bell, okay? Yeah. And he wrote a book called Love Wins. And this book just in one chapter questioned. It didn't even give a different answer. Yes, that's the one. He questions if hell is forever and if people in Christian theology can't get out of hell at some point. That's all he did in one chapter. And John Piper famously tweeted, "Farewell, Rob Bell." And he was quite literally excommunicated from the entire evangelical culture within a month. I mean, a church I attended when that book came out had a pamphlet warning me of the heresy of Rob Bell's book. I swear to God, if you believe in God, of course. And
your God.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I swear to my God, but I think that's an important. I think it's an important thing to mention because evangelicalism will absolutely spit out whoever it doesn't want, and that's why I don't buy the argument. Well, it's not our church. I'm not in control of this. No. We know when gatekeepers, lay down the law, so to speak, and kick out their own because they've gone too far beyond certain evangelical theology. But apparently, abusing your parishioners and hiring pedophiles is not far enough. Which again. It truly, even as I say it again for the 1,000th time, I go, I can't believe it. I just can't.
Yeah.
The excuse I used to hear a lot was, oh, they're sinners and God chooses sinners and imperfect people to speak for him and shit like that. Do you get that a lot? Do you hear that a lot?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the go-to move, which of course is just a tool to excuse behavior. Okay. Yeah. Because when we all know when it's someone that they don't like, right. I mean, and I there's a lot of examples of that, but there are people we can say that maybe have been murdered by the police, and those people have no problem bringing up their criminal history. And look what this person did. They won't say it as bluntly, but they lead you to believe, well, maybe they deserved it. But now this person, John Macarthur, needs a lot of grace. So it's very selective and weaponized grace to I would argue, to maintain and keep power in these evangelical spaces.
Yeah. The weaponized grace. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because they control it. Yeah. Makes sense.
Trademark. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, writing that down. So, do you find, how does this make you feel as a Christian, as somebody who believes in the religion itself?
Yeah.
How does that make you feel with all these different scandals going on?
Are we allowed to say swear words on this show?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fucking angry.
Yeah.
That's why, I mean, part of why I started New Evangelicals, it wasn't so much necessarily the church scandals, but since being a part of this world and seeing the underbelly has only made my fire rage even harder. I mean, it makes me so furious. I find it inconsistent. And I want to be clear about something. I don't think anyone in the world demands perfection from anyone. We all know we all do stupid, harmful shit. Okay. Yeah. Full acknowledgement. We're asking for accountability.
Yes.
That's what we're asking for.
Yeah.
And to see the people who, as a child, drilled into my head, repent, be humble, you're not above reproach, then turn around and support people who, we're not talking about, said a mean word here or there. We're talking about people who hired pedophiles who either or were the pedophile or who abused parishioners for years, right? And are unrepentant. And the response is give them grace. Like, what? Wait, what? No. That's not what we're talking about here. So it makes me very angry. If you can't tell already, I am Italian, but it makes me angry.
As it should. I mean,
yeah.
Rational human beings for sure.
Yes.
Tough.
So the people who reach out to you on your page, do you find they come from all walks of like deconstruction or Christianity? Have they left altogether? What kind of people do you have reach out to you?
Yeah, deconstruction is one of those words that can mean a lot of things. So the way I like to kind of just give people an image is deconstruction is really an explosion. People go in all different directions. I know plenty of people who deconstructed, they took the off-ramp to Christianity and faith. It's a respectable and honorable decision. I understand why. I get it. For me, it's not one of those like, well, we have to pray for them. No, I totally understand it. I get it. I deal with people who are having a crisis of theology. So what they are thinking is, I don't get it. I took the words of Jesus seriously, and then they told me to vote for the guy on the cover of Playboy magazine. Right. I mean, that's the people that I mostly deal with. I mean, obviously there are some people who might be non-religious anymore in that sense, and they like our content, but we primarily exist for the folks who are trying to get out of the basement of fundamentalism and explore the Christian tradition beyond white supremacist Christian nationalism, evangelical theology. That's what it is. So we deal mostly in those spaces right now. Yeah. Right.
So that's good. Yeah. How do you I've noticed you have a lot of interaction with some pretty big names, especially Allie Beth Stuckey comes to mind. Yeah. How do you handle retaliation, or has there been any directly from her? Or
let's clear it up. What happened there? First off, I gotta know.
There's a couple of layers to that. Let me just say, one of our core values as an organization, and I try to emulate as a human, although of course not perfect, is we really don't want to dehumanize people that we don't like. I think that's a major problem right now, and it can be very easy to dehumanize those who dehumanize. And Allie Stuckey dehumanizes people. That's part of what she does. That's part of that right-wing media world.
Was and that Stuckey or Sucky?
That's for you to say, not for me, right? But I say that because at the same time, we have to advocate for accountability, and we have to advocate when harm is happening to especially marginalized communities that Allie intentionally targets. I kind of see myself like the little dog nipping on Allie's heel and other right-wing media proponents. I mean, I'm the small fish, but I like nipping a little bit and lets them know, hey, we're here and we're not going to take this shit. I'm not going to dehumanize you. I'm not going to call you a piece of shit. I don't believe in that. You're made in the image of God in my worldview, but your thoughts and your rhetoric is shitty. And we're gonna call out the harm that your ideas are perpetuating. So Allie has every now and then, she'll pick something up and say how ridiculous it is. Then her followers, swarm my comments and call me an idiot. But I expect that, okay? And honestly, to be transparent with you, I don't fully hold a large account accountable to their followers. You can't control that. I've had people who follow me say harmful things that I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? Right. I understand that to a degree. And so I try to be gracious there and not assume that all of Allie Stuckey followers are like, I was like, yeah, charge and sick 'em, but we definitely have critiqued her work many times and have called it out. We even spent 3 hours on our podcast going through one of her own podcast episodes where she brought on a Alex Jones level reporter trying to say how the January 6th insurrection was started by the police and the FBI. So we went through it line by line and debunked it because it was so abhorrent. So we definitely are trying to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's good. And stopping the spread of like misinformation and
we're trying. I mean, they're really powerful. They are they're well funded. Daily Wire, Turning Point USA, Ali Sucky, they all talk to each other. They know exactly what they're doing. Yeah. So they're really effective, but we're trying to do our best to just get better paths forward that aren't propagandists on the left, so to speak, but just trying to be accurate and expose how this is not the truth all the time, Yeah. So, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So why does it seem that the church, do you think, seems to get away with hiding some of these things, like the SBC? Like, I feel like that has just been a big thing that's just come to light recently. Is it just because they don't have someone to hold them accountable, or?
That's a really great question, and that's that could be a book in and of itself. So I'll try and condense I'll try and condense maybe one or two strands that I see and how they intersect. I think that the connections are important to make. First, let's talk about the SBC, Southern Baptist Convention. Yeah. Within the past year, they had a major falling out of just huge scandal that really people in top leadership were either abusive, were protecting abusers and dismissing survivors. First, we have to recognize that the SBC started because they wanted to keep slavery in their circles. That's why the SBC was founded, over slavery. Okay, and this is anyone, even their most fundamentalist people like Al Mohler, concedes that point. Okay, this is not propaganda. You can look it up. The North wanted to free the slaves, and the South said, "Hell no, it's biblical. We're SBC." Okay, so we have to start there. Its foundations were built on white supremacy. Now, I'm certainly not going to say that every single person, every member in the SBC is a white supremacist, okay? And I wouldn't even say that most of the leaders would identify or even have that worldview willingly. But certainly there are elements of white supremacy, especially during what's called the conservative resurgence, where really conservative fundamentalism took over the SBC and their structure, and it pushed them more towards what's called a complementarian view. So women can't be leaders, all that kind of stuff. At one point the SBC supported abortion. I'm not sure if you know that, but they have, you can read every year how they say, we support abortion in the case of mental health of the mother, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can see them slowly change it over time as the conservative resurgence took it over. So we have to acknowledge that it's kind of in their DNA to have this supremacist ideology that is built on hierarchy. All right. So we start there. The other layer of this is that because that world automatically is not bent towards believing women, but instead bent towards believing men and to protecting the pastor and protecting the leadership, because a lot of times Christians, well, I should say evangelicals, Christians is a very big term, but oftentimes evangelicals will say, oh, but they do so much for the gospel. Oh, look at how God's using them. So what they'll do is they'll justify the work that's being done and say, well, what's a few people who have some complaints? So they create ways of justifying why it's not a big deal. And eventually that soda can shook for decades. And God bless the survivors who finally were relentless in making this a national issue. And now the federal government is investigating it, as they should. But I think those are a few strands that we have to consider that I think lead to abuse like this. A little long-winded, but it's important to understand.
That's fine.
No, that's great. You still got 30 minutes. Keep going.
Yes.
A question from the group. This guy could be the nicest person on earth.
Thank you.
Always positive.
So kind. We're not all assholes. I promise. We're trying to fix it. I promise. I get it.
No.
Question for the guest. What are your thoughts on churches' tax-exempt statuses?
I love this question. Let me give you some data. The average church has 80 people in it.
Yeah.
The average church draws $80,000 a year in donations.
Wow.
I do not believe in a blanket revoking tax-exempt status for all churches.
No.
I think that what we need is people to enforce laws, because there are churches. I can give you a list off the top of my head. There's Cornerstone Calvary Chapel Church in Virginia. There's Awaken Church. There's Dream City Church. All people who are misusing and using their, and I would say violating the Johnson Amendment and using their own funds and platforms to push for far right-wing candidates. And a lot of this is due to Charlie Kirk and Turning Point Faith in USA, which I could talk a lot about, but we have to understand that. So that being said, I do not support just, revoke their tax-exempt status. I don't think that's a wise decision. I think what we do is we look at what's being done already, and we look at those churches and say, hey, you're in violation. You're going to lose your tax-exempt status. And by the way, this happened with Bob Jones. Bob Jones University, which is in the 70s. Bob Jones University was a segregationist school. Bob Jones lost his tax-exempt status for not allowing interracial dating. He sued the IRS under the pretense of religious freedom and liberty. Does that sound familiar, anyone? Anyone out there? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Bob Jones said the government is violating my religious freedom to keep the races separate, because he was a staunch segregationist, and he lost his tax-exempt status. Now, did the IRS say all Christian education loses their tax-exempt status? No, they enforced it where necessary. That is the view I would take.
Enforcement.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes
absolutely.
I can see your point from there. Yeah. Thank you.
Definitely.
There is a question from the, if you can, I can't highlight it. Thank you. So it says, how do you think atheists can help Christians get rid of fundamentalism? Could we develop a panel of theists as well as atheists to debunk fundamentalism?
So that's a really great question. Let's just say the obvious. Obviously, as an atheist Christian, we have very different ways of viewing this, God and what it means to be and all that stuff, right? I think that there's great space for great partnerships. I work a lot with Andrew Seidel from Americans United. He's an atheist constitutional lawyer. Have had him on the show. But to be honest with you, hidden tech gems, Christians, for right or for wrong, I would say mostly wrong, have been programmed to see atheists as moralist, evil humans. And so whatever you say will be taken as trying to destroy Christianity. Whether you're saying that or not, it doesn't matter, because the evangelical apologetics industry has done a great job of convincing people that atheists cannot be as moral as Christians, which obviously as a Christian, I say bullshit. I mean, just look at January 6th. Okay. I mean, there's evidence there right away. So, but what I'm saying is that I think that there is work to be done as far as Christians and atheists having unified ideas of like, hey, to promote human flourishing, we align on this. And by the way, I think it's safe to say, Michael, that you and I would both support each other's freedom to practice our beliefs how we see fit, as long as we're not trying to, storm the fucking Capitol building. You know what I mean?
There you
go. So
yeah.
So I think that's important to recognize, but I don't think you're going to make a lot of headway as an atheist in evangelical fundamentalist spaces. I think that's the work that people like me need to do, who have the language, have the experience, and also who are Christian, Jesus followers, right? I can speak the language and hopefully try and steer that ship towards what I would argue would be a more authentic way of following Jesus. Can we take, when Jesus says we fight for liberation, for all, can we take that passage seriously? Can we take clothing the naked seriously? That's all this comes down to for me. I'm not twisting many arms to make this possible.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't like hearing from the atheists, that's for sure. They've already made up their mind about us.
Yeah, and I'm sure, and I have some friends who are atheists, and they say, listen, we have our own problems sometimes too. We have our own fundamentalists who can be real, jerks. I get that, but the power balance is way different. Christianity rules America, okay, not atheism. And so I feel bad for you guys. Yeah.
Well, that's
why we do
Canada,
what we do.
So.
You're in Canada. Yeah, fair enough.
So I'm good-ish. Yeah.
It's all the US
for now.
For now,
it really is.
It felt like it's creeping, but
we're all trickling up.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So
go ahead, Michael.
No, 100%.
We're both so polite. I think you're Canadian too.
First.
No, you go.
No, I've asked a lot. I want you to ask some. I'm good.
Oh man. So just a quick, what has the Catholic Church been up to lately?
Okay, so let me just say right now, that is not my lane. I don't have a whole lot of information on that. I don't want to speak on things that I'm not qualified to speak on just from a knowledge level. One thing I can say is that the Catholic Church in America definitely has a Christian nationalist bent to it, and there is a stream of Christian nationalists in the Catholic Church. This is not unique to evangelicalism. Mormons have the same thing. The fundamentalist LDS have a very Christian nationalist ideology. Now, evangelicalism is the most dominant as far as money, power, and influence, but you could definitely find those things in the Catholic Church. Plus, the Catholic Church has serious sexual abuse scandal, a lot of cover up there, 100%. I just never grew up in that world. I don't feel, obviously I'll critique it when I need to, but it's not what we really focus on for our lane.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that recent Indigenous Canadian thing, that was just horrid.
Yes.
Horrid.
No, it was hard. Absolutely.
Horrid.
It was despicable, frankly.
And the headdress, like
I saw that and I cringed really hard. I was like, oh my God, this is it was bad. It was really bad. Absolutely.
It's over the top. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Completely.
Go ahead, Stacey. Go ahead.
Yeah.
That was my good one.
That was your good one. You got to no. If you want a good podcast, though, that I'm listening to right now on the Indigenous and the Catholic Church, it's called Kuper Island, Kuper Island, and it's really well done. So it gives you a bit more of insights. But be warned, trigger warning, like crazy. So do you have a church for yourself, Tim? Have you found a church that you attend that encompasses how you feel, or do you really are a church outside of the building?
Yeah, no, I don't go to a church right now.
You don't? Okay.
No. The last church I was in, my church gave me an ultimatum: either stop doing this work online or stop drumming as a volunteer drummer with them for 6 years. So I said, I got to go. I have to do this work. It's more important to me.
Wow.
So I walked away and pretty much lost my entire community within a couple months.
Oh my goodness.
We need to take a poll. It's always the drummers. Always the drummers. Like every time.
Well, it worked out because I played professionally still. I played in a really great cover band every weekend, making some side money and having a lot of fun. So I love playing music. It's my passion. But yeah, that one definitely sung. I mean, that was probably one of the most difficult times in my relational life. And I am on the Enneagram, if any of you know what that is. I'm a type 6, so I'm a loyalist. So that one really hurt for sure. But, it is what it is.
I have not done the Enneagram because it was satanic from
I
was told.
Right. If you take the Enneagram, you're a godless Marxist, on the way to worshiping Satan. We all know this.
Exactly. So
I still did it.
But I have been looking to see, where can I do this Enneagram quiz? Since I've left, I'm like, okay, now I'm curious. I want to do it. Because I want to know what I am. So
I found it helpful. It's helped me.
Yeah. Well, it's just like a personality quiz, which I've done before. But then look, I left the church. So maybe they are.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So what kind of church were you in when they kicked you out? Like, did they... I'm curious because I've left the church and they are publicly shaming us currently and excommunicating us. So I'm just wondering if
I was part of a church in the Assemblies of God denomination. It was, I didn't grow up that way. I grew up hymns only, super conservative, like I said. Okay. This church, I just poured everything into. I mean, honestly, I really loved the people I worked with. We did some really powerful things. I love drumming there. I'm also, like I said, I play professionally, so I love high-end gear, and we were doing all that. We were doing really great production. We were doing a lot of high-tech stuff that I just love nerding out on. We did some other stuff too that was kind of more well-known in our area. We did like a multi-church worship night where we had multiple churches coming out. We were live streaming it professionally. So I was really all in there. I poured everything in as a volunteer. So yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things where it was like, this is a choice that I don't want to have to make, but I was given that choice to make. So I had to make a call. So I did.
Yeah. Wow. And you've lost people too. So even though you've stayed in the church, you've lost people, and that's heartbreaking. And yeah. And we've left the church, and I don't know, Michael, if you've lost people, but yeah, I've gone through that. Yeah. Obviously, it seems. So
a lot of folks have. That's
yeah.
I mean, We probably got 10,000 DMs in our first year on Instagram.
Wow.
And just story after story. I mean, I wish I could say it's not common, but it's a very common experience, but it's very painful. And
Yeah.
I understand it completely. It's really hard
Yeah.
losing people you thought you were going to do life with forever.
Yeah.
Right. Only to
Yeah.
have them say like, get the hell out. You're a heretic. And it's like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
aren't we friends though? Like, can't we coexist beyond having difference of opinion? And in my case, I'm still a Christian. It was just like,
Right.
guys, I'm not talking about anything that is heretical, but it wasn't
Yeah.
enough. So
Still going to the same heaven, right?
right. In theory, right?
Yeah.
I think.
Wow. So all
That's
because
tough,
of
man.
your page, hey? All because of
Yeah,
your
yeah.
Instagram page?
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, and
Wow.
I was asking questions like, at the time, my journey with even being queer inclusive and affirming
Mm.
was a journey. I mean, I fully admit, like, I didn't grow up that way. I wasn't that way for a long time. But at that time of the page, it was still new. I was kind of arguing for like, hey, the church disagrees on a lot of things. Why can't we disagree and still affirm? Like, hey, maybe we don't see this
Right.
theology the same way, but that shouldn't stop us from worshiping together. And even that
Yeah.
was too much for that church. It was just a bridge too far. Obviously now I'm fully affirming like on the
Yes.
theological level as well. But it was just frustrating. Like I didn't get it. I tried to understand it. I just couldn't understand.
That's a really good question because there are a lot of theological differences as far as like baptism goes, and there's like gifts of the Holy Spirit and that kind of thing. And they're just like, well,
Yeah.
those are secondary issues. It doesn't matter. But
Right. But you're
Yeah.
gay? Oh, I don't know. It's like,
Yeah.
really? That's the
Yeah.
issue?
that's what
It's-
it boils down to.
Sexuality isn't in any of the creeds. Like, what are we really arguing over? It's
You're
not
right.
an Orthodox thing. Yeah, it's not the Nicene Creed.
No.
Like I affirm the Trinity. I mean, I affirm the most basic Orthodox shit. I affirm a physical resurrection, but I'm queer
Orthodox shit.
affirming.
Yeah.
I'm queer affirming, so that's a bridge too far for you. Like,
Wow.
okay, dude. Like
Yeah.
it is what it
Yeah.
is. What it is.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's actually quite embarrassing. I've had flashbacks of sitting through services where they're just being downright horrible, talking about LGBTQ. And I've actually the last few days, I've just had like some religious trauma memories of sitting there and being like, I can't believe I sat there. And even though it went against what I was just wrestling with and it just didn't jive, but I sat there and
Yeah.
it's
same.
hard. Yeah. That's what I've
In a
really
lot
been
of
going
ways-
through the last few days.
In a lot of ways, I see the work I do now as repentance of like trying to turn and go the other way from the harm that I was a part of. Ignorantly, I didn't realize it, but it was still harm. Impact matters more than intent, right? And so I've just done my best to try and go the other way away from all of that. But it's tough, especially when you start reading basic American history in the 20th century, and you realize that it's the same talking points from segregationists that are now being used to demonize the queer community. I mean, there's no difference in the logic or the rhetoric. You just insert queer for black, and you have the same argument. So I'm pretty convinced that evangelicalism is once again on the completely wrong side of this issue. Convinced more than ever, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Right there with you on that one. I mean, their arguments are where's it going to stop? It's going to go to incest and bestiality, and it's like, holy shit, man! Just let them love who they want to love. Stop throwing in all that stuff.
Right. Right.
It's tough.
And again,
It's
it's the same playbook that we've seen time and time again from the boogeyman evangelical playbook. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, don't forget, and forgive the harshness of this or how blunt it might sound, but white Southern evangelicals were making claims that black people were more likely to assault women, right? They were inferior. So again, like people like Bob Jones, I have their sermons archived on my computer. You can see how they make their biblical arguments that God demands segregation, or else you're not a real Christian. You're a liberal. I mean, it's the same word for word rhetoric. Just insert segregation instead of queer or whatever it would be. So this is nothing new under the sun, but evangelicals fall for it time and time again because they don't have, I would argue, intentionally, they're not taught a wide depth of the circles and waters that they're swimming in.
No, that makes sense. So it makes you kind of wonder, what is it going to be in 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 years?
Yeah.
Don't want to know, but
It's a cycle.
Well, the rise of Trump really concerned me, and it's only gotten worse, in my opinion. I mean, we're really headed down a pretty fascist rabbit hole with the far right and the church. Well, the white evangelical church, it's good.
Yeah.
I like being specific because not all Christians, not all evangelicals even, but the white evangelical population as a whole is certainly just hanging onto the coattails of Charlie Kirk and Matt Walsh and Tucker Carlson saying, yeah, this sounds great. Yeah, groomers in the school, CRT, wokeism. It's like, oh my God, like, what are we talking about here? It blows my mind. Truly does.
I doubt they even know what they're talking about.
Well, they don't. I mean,
I don't think they do.
Like, they don't really fully comprehend.
No, and when you look at, there's a person named Christopher Rufo, who kind of is the architect behind the CRT panic, who said on Twitter that this is intentional, that they took the term CRT and they made it a catch-all term for anything racist, which is not what critical race theory is. It's an academic study that has existed for a long time. And to see, the right-wing media machine pick it up, and then what they do is they take the term, redefine it, straw man it, then they defeat that, and evangelicals believe it. It's an anti-intellectual approach that does a lot of harm.
Yeah, no, it's true. And even the people that I was listening to before I deconverted, they didn't actually go into detail what exactly CRT was. All I remember hearing is it's bad, it's coming in the schools.
Anything
your
negative,
children are going to learn. And it was like the boogeyman. And I was like, I kept saying, what is it? Like, what is CRT? I didn't know. And I sat down with a friend one day and I was like, okay, I don't actually know what this is, but apparently I'm supposed to be afraid of it. And she's like, no, you need to research what it is. And it's nothing to be afraid of. And I said, okay, well, thank you. And went from there. But the way that they hype these things up, it creates this panic in people. And
which is intentional. Right, that's what
Trump. Yeah, absolutely. And once you're out, for me, I was to say for being now I'm out of it. Yeah, no, it's okay. I see how it is intentional, and I see they don't actually go into a lot of detail. They just create that panic, and people are freaking out, and then it's just that's it. The conversation's done.
That's right. They take obscure things and then they make them like they're experts on it, when in reality they're not. And they intentionally cherry pick data points or examples to create this idea that groomers are taking over the schools, right? It's like, what, because of 3 drag queen shows where nothing happened? Like that's your proof that groomers are taking over the schools? But again, in the churches. And again, for the audience out there, this is not in a vacuum, okay? And I just want to put out one point of this. Look up R.J. Rushdoony, the father of the Christian Reconstruction movement. He advocated for destroying the public school system. This is in the 60s because it was secular. It was not Christian. It was destroying the lives of children. This is the same stuff recycled time and time again. This is not new. The homeschool movement, not new. Take your kids out of the public school, not new. Defund the public schools, not new. It's not new. But people don't know that. And we need to.
Yeah,
it's true.
It's wrapped up in a different package right now.
Yeah.
And
you're stuck in that bubble and you're not looking back, and you gotta do your research.
Exactly. Yeah. This is a little bit kind of off topic, but it kind of goes on to a podcast my husband was listening to on QAnon and how, in a way, I know it's a little off topic. Okay, there. Yes.
I have their book right here.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we're just throwing books around all over.
Yeah. I have their book. I got that one. My books are over there. But yeah, they were saying how, and again, like, I think QAnon is definitely a part of like the whole Christian, there's like a Christian nationalist segment to it, which is obvious, but they were saying like they've had to kind of change and morph in a way where now they're infiltrating into the schools as far as like voting in, like who you vote into your school board. And we see that because we're actually having an election here, and there's a new party called Parents' Voice, and you look up the candidates and it's all anti-LGBT, any kind of teaching on that, or it's all anti-COVID rhetoric or anti-vaccine mandate, any kind of thing. And it's just like he heard the podcast and then we're like, oh my goodness, we're seeing the billboard. So you have to be always on high alert right now.
It is it's part of the network and what they're designed to do. They are really working hard to get people in the school boards to change things. I'm not sure if you know who Awakened Church is in San Diego, but they've done this time and time again. This is when CRT was really big with the COVID stuff. And honestly, besides maybe the atheist James Lindsay, besides maybe him, I can't think of any other prominent atheist that is supporting this nonsense. It is always evangelical, fundamentalist Christians, or maybe some Catholics. But I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but all roads lead back to evangelical fundamentalism and how they're funded. It's a shadow network, and that's not conspiratorial. There's a great book by Catherine Stewart called The Power Worshippers that details this with actual details, not just big picture nonsense about their organizations. There's something called Project Blitz. Do you guys know what that is?
Yeah,
I don't.
They were trying to get all the stuff in.
Yeah, so Project Blitz is a national movement where Christian nationalists are just trying to ram as much legislation through state legislators to get crazy things passed. I mean, one example of this, we did a video on this on our TikTok, is that they're advocating for public schools to be mandated to offer an elective on biblical literacy under the pretense of teaching kids history. Now, any Christian scholar, anyone worth their weight, will tell you the Bible is not a historical book primarily. All right. Most of the stuff that happened is sprinkled in with myth intentionally, by the way, by the authors, because that's how Hebrew minds worked. So just to make it seem like the Bible is an accurate history book is ridiculous, and it's simply a Trojan horse to get the Bible and Christianity back in the schools. That's just one example out of many pieces of legislation that this network is trying to ram through. And their goal, the theory is, if we ram through 70 pieces of legislation and 2 get through, we've done our job. So they don't care that most gets defeated, as long as they can get 1 or 2 in. And I wish I was exaggerating this, but you can Google it. It's all right there.
Yeah, I wish you were
Scary
too.
stuff, man. Scary stuff. Just throw it all at the system, see what sticks.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it's not going to be.
Yeah.
Question from the audience here. I'm sure you know you have a hard road ahead of you. Do you feel hopeless at times? What helps you in those times if you do? Well, I'm sure we all know the answer to that one.
Jesus? No, not Jesus. I mean, sometimes, but who is Jesus these days? I don't know. You know, the gospel accounts aren't that accurate. They all say different things. Who the hell knows what's going on? I don't know. So, you know, the honest answer is that, I mean, there are definitely I wouldn't say I feel hopeless. I think there are days where I'm really frustrated, and I see the work that needs to be done and that it can be done, but I get frustrated because of funding restrictions, right? Like, okay, we're a small nonprofit. What can we afford to do? But honestly, we have a really beautiful community that has been a part of our Instagram, and we have 5,600 people on our Facebook, and we have a really great podcast community, and they're just really good humans, and they've been just so supportive of the work that I'm doing. But more importantly, we're doing it together. You know, we have about 10 volunteers who work with us to make it all happen. So there are good people out there that I've been able to meet through this work. Most of them are digital, but it definitely helps feel not alone and not as frustrated, you know, but certainly we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I'm trying to channel that maybe anxiety and frustration into something that hopefully changes things. You know, I'm swinging the bat as hard as I fucking can, hoping that, you know, that we change something around here, and it keeps me going.
Yeah.
Blitz it, man. Just keep trying to something.
Keep ramming it through. I mean, I don't use a lot of Christian language these days just because of how I'm rethinking what it actually means for me. But I will say that in a sense, I feel like this is my calling in life, if that makes sense. You know, I feel very drawn to this work. This work gets me out of bed in the morning. I think about it 24/7, which sometimes is a problem. You can ask my wife. But I'm very committed to it. You know, I just think that we need a new evangelical movement that is willing to critique and say we have problems and we have to find better paths forward as Jesus followers that love all of our neighbor, not just the white Christian nationalist fundamentalist ones.
Not just the ones that agree with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. We see a lot of that separation there. Just because they don't agree, they're the enemy.
That's
exactly.
right.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
There it is. Okay, go ahead.
I love it. Let me just say, this is great because I podcast all day asking the questions. So being asked questions, I'm like, oh,
it's kind of fun.
Coming.
Oh,
this is great. I love it.
They might be a little random. This one just popped in my head, so I just wrote a word down.
It.
But as far as like your theology, do you believe in the devil, or do you believe in a hell?
We do a Zoom theology group where I bring in actual scholars to talk about these things on a deep level. And we just did one this past Monday on Satan in the Bible. And we had my friend Jo Lumen come on. She has her master's degree, and she is, I mean, fucking brilliant. You know, I will put it this way. You know, the word Satan means the adversary. Let's just start right there, okay? And the how we think about Satan in America, even on a pop culture level, is not at all what I think the Hebrew authors had in mind. And we can certainly even trace the evolution of the term to Satan. You know, I mean, Paul's in the Greek culture, Satan's more of a figure there, but the Old Testament and really the Hebrew Bible doesn't really talk about Satan a whole lot besides maybe in Job. And even in Job, God gives permission for Satan to do something. So I would say that, do I believe in like an individual figure that's like pulling magical strings somewhere? No. But do I think that the idea of being an adversary exists, or that there is this concept that I'm trying to think through? Like, okay, yeah, there sometimes I do get tempted with things, right? What does that mean to be tempted? I'm thinking about it in that framework. But no, I mean, this whole idea of, you know, it's demonic, it's satanic, it's one last thing about this, and I'll shut up, but it's just so ironic to see. It's ironic to see the fundamentalists who claim to be biblical completely pull from modern culture's caricatures of Satan to then say this is what it is. It's like, what? No, like do 1 30-minute overview on what the Satan. It's really the Satan, by the way, especially in the New Testament, not just Satan. It's the Satan. But no, that's not what's going on here. So that stuff really frustrates me. As far as hell, you know, I don't believe in eternal conscious torment. That's for sure. I don't think that is. And I know your audience doesn't know me, so it's funny it's just funny that I have to use words differently because of what they can mean. I don't say the term biblically often because I'm not one of those people that's like, well, the Bible's clear, because it's really not. But I don't think that there's a strong case to make that the Bible supports eternal conscious torment. If we're going to go down that road of what's the Bible say, I would say that the evidence really isn't there. I would personally lean at this point in my journey, which could always change because the Bible is really fucking complicated. I would lean towards more of an annihilationist perspective, or ultimate reconciliation at some point, where we're ultimately at the end of the day, through Christ, all things are reconciled and made whole again, would be the idea. That doesn't mean that I don't think hell as a purge, a purging fire, a refining fire, might not exist, but that's all metaphorical. That's not a literal oven somewhere, you know. But I think that the concept of trial by fire is the theme all throughout the scriptures. But again, I don't think it has the same cultural meaning that we think of when we think of fire in as moderners or modern people.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah. Hey, I like your
answer.
answer.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question. Don't get offended. Right off the bat.
I don't know what it is.
Nobody knows what this is. Mike throws it out there. All right. So I have to know, like, it's just been bothering me since the beginning here. You know about all these church scandals. You believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Where is Jesus during all of these rapes, essentially? Where do you think he's at?
With the poor, the oppressed, the victims, the marginalized, etc.
Just watching. He's just there.
Oh, okay. You're asking in terms of
where is he?
Are you asking in terms of like a sovereign? You know, like why isn't Jesus doing something about it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So
let me work for you.
Yeah, let me lay my cards on the table. First off, I'm highly offended by that question. I'm triggered.
Good.
So I'm out of here. This is ridiculous. How dare you question me? But let me just say that I am not going to probably give the most complete answer because I'm wrestling with that myself. Let me just say that. Like, I think about that often. Right now, the way that I view a lot of this is that I ultimately believe that as people who are made in the Imago Dei, that humans have an obligation to be representative of Christ on earth. I believe that Jesus ultimately and the way that God has set things up. This is my personal theology. I'm not asking anyone else to believe it, just kind of how I see it right now. But ultimately, I believe that humans were created to co-partner with the divine to steward the earth and relationships well. And that essentially what I'm trying to say is I believe that the physical manifestation of Jesus is people who are working with those people trying to change those systems. Ultimately is what I believe. I don't believe that God is a puppet master pulling strings. I reject the Calvinist view of determinism, that, it's all been decreed by God. I'm still exploring this, but loosely more of like a process theology kind of view where God's really unraveling with us as time goes on. Tripp Fuller is the person that I've really found really helpful with this. It's been a very helpful explanation of evil, which obviously is something that I think we all have to wrestle with in our own worldview and in our own way. But yeah, ultimately, I believe that Christians, or really people in this case, not even just Christians because they do such a shitty job, but humans have an obligation and are the physical manifestation of the divine on earth, and that we have a choice on what we do with that. Do we abuse it for our own selfish benefit and perpetuate the cycles of chaos and destruction, or do we use it for healing, to bring heaven on earth, if you will, and to participate in cycles of goodness and wholeness? That's kind of how I see it right now.
That is definitely something I'd love to talk to you further about. Maybe another time, though.
Sure,
maybe on my show. Come on my show. We'll talk for sure.
Still working through it, by the way. So I'm sure there's a lot of holes there, but that's just kind of what I'm thinking through at this moment in my journey.
No, I appreciate that. I've heard that before, actually. The whole oneness and growing and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think what I like is that you're on a journey and you're open to, like, saying, hey, maybe I'm wrong about this, or I'm open to this, and you're not stuck in what most evangelicals are like, nope, I'm right, this is it, there's no other way. yeah and I like that.
Refreshing.
I think and I don't want to listen, I appreciate that, thank you. Honestly, I think that this should be par for the course for Christians, because all it takes is a freshman level Bible class to realize how complicated the Bible is, also how diverse the Christian tradition is. Stacy, right? Is that right?
That's my name. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Stacy, you said, that you grew up kind of in my circles a little bit, a little more with the Calvinist lens, and that's a real arrogant viewpoint of the world. And once you step outside that bubble and realize what they're claiming, that, out of forget the world religions, out of the Christian religion, they found the one tiny little microscopic narrow gate that has the true gospel, and everyone else is just an idiot. You realize, like, that's a big claim to make, and also it kind of falls apart pretty quickly. So I just think it's important for Christians to recognize that we're part of a very complicated Christian tradition, and there are some brilliant theologians who have thought about these things in different ways, and we should be willing to explore that and be a little more humble before we say this is how it is. No, this is how we're trying to make sense of the world around us, and I'm willing to change that in light of better data.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Holy shit, thank you.
I know.
You're welcome.
No, it's so refreshing, and because I grew up very like, nope, we're right, they're wrong. So there's a question.
Same.
Another question from Hidden Tech. I personally like that humans have such different views. Of course, not fundamentalism. Do you think these differences enrich the human experience? Good question. Do you think fundamentalism even enriches the human experience, or is it just shit that we should just get?
Fundamentalism is a big word, and that can be applied anywhere. I mean, we're seeing this in Iran right now, right? We're seeing fundamentalism of a different religion and people fighting for their rights away from that, right? And fundamentalism can happen anywhere. In fact, we tell people often that we're not trying to become fundamentalists all over again. I'm not trying to become another fundamentalist of progressive Christianity. Right? I'm trying to be a little more humble about my beliefs and realize that I'm still working through them. I would say this. I would say that certainly humanity is diverse and beautiful and complicated, and we need the various perspectives to help us make sense of how we move forward. There is this theme in the Bible of wisdom, of how does humanity use and learn from God's wisdom to make wise decisions. I mean, that's really what the Adam and Eve garden story is. It's a test of, do we partner with the divine for wisdom, or do we take it on our own and chaos enters the world? And I think we can all see parts of that in our own lives when we've been part of those cycles. And I think that as we work together, in Christian thinking, there is this idea that the Spirit speaks through a multitude of people as they wrestle through something together. So as, 5 people were in a room trying to make a decision about something, and as they share their different experiences and they're wrestling through this really tense situation, the Spirit is speaking through and saying, hey, maybe this is the wisest decision given the plurality of perspectives that are represented here. So I certainly think that idea can be helpful. Obviously, there are boundaries to that. No, I don't want a fascist in this circle. No, I don't want a Nazi in this circle. I just don't. So of course there are limits to all this stuff. But the idea of working together to try and make wise decisions that benefit all of our neighbors, I think, is super helpful and needed.
Absolutely, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kumbaya.
I mean, Michael, I don't know you that well, but I think that it'd be fair to say, like, if you and I were talking about an idea or a direction to go in, and I offered some perspective, maybe like from the book of Proverbs, some wisdom literature, like, yeah, that's not a bad idea. It's like, yeah, right, it's not a bad idea. Like, we can agree on that. I'm not trying to convert you, but like, there is some wisdom that we can learn from. There's some ancient wisdom here that might help us make wise decisions going forward.
Yeah, and my argument with that is there's better options out there. There's better books to go to. Books that don't have, all the bloodshed and the child killing and the,
well, I mean, the Bible is 66 books, right? So Book of Proverbs doesn't,
even in there, there's things in there that's just like, I don't know. Isn't that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom? Isn't that in Proverbs? I think that I don't recall exactly where that's from, but yeah, I mean, things like that. It's just like, I mean, there's definitely better books out there. The self-help book, excuse for the Bible. I have issues, 100%. I can run a mile with that, though.
Feel free.
No, that's not the
okay. Fair enough. My bad.
That's the other show. The Bible says what?
Okay.
Sure no. I enjoy. Thank you so much for your patience with us today. 100%.
Yeah,
no, you did awesome. I appreciate it. Typically, the Christians I'm used to talking to are just finding any way to jab back at me. So
what a waste of time.
Refreshing. It's entertaining, at least.
There is a part of me, if I'm truly a friend with someone, I love to argue for fun. I do. Like, I will have a beer with someone. I will discuss a theological thing. I'll talk to an atheist friend. We'll stream at each other in good faith, But on the internet, on podcasts, like, let's face it, I know I'm not going to convince you. You're not going to convince me of losing my faith in God the way I see it right now. Why waste time with that when we can talk about bigger, more important issues? Like, how the fuck do we resist Christian nationalism and find better ways forward and get, universal healthcare in America, for crying out loud, right? There are other things that we can agree on that we should start working towards.
Yeah, 100%.
No.
And by the way, I want to say, I trust you, Michael, that if an atheist faction ever rose up trying to overthrow our government, you would say the same thing about your own people, for the record.
No, yes, it's not my own people. It's just a lack of a belief.
You know what I'm saying, okay?
We can go down that route later. Yeah.
You know what I mean, okay? What is it? The four horsemen of atheism? Is it the Sam Harrises of the world, right? If they got all fascists on us, I expect you to say this is bullshit. We need better paths forward. I would say amen 100%. To that. I agree, Michael.
Push that. Yes. Push that shit aside. We don't need
it. Amen.
Absolutely.
I don't see any more questions here. I did want to. Let's see. Nope. I did want to wrap it up with where we can find your stuff, though.
Yes.
TikTok.
Yeah. Is it? We're everywhere. Anywhere that the New Evangelicals name is, it's pretty much us. We have a website, thenewevangelicals.com. Instagram is our main. I'm most active on Instagram during the day in real time with people because of the DMing situation. But we're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. We have a great podcast that is full of people. So we interview a wide array of people in the Christian tradition and kind of outside of it, just asking big questions. And a lot of them are scholars. Like, they're legitimate. This is their academic field. So I do my best to bring people, guests who are thinking really deeply about just how to be human, mostly from the Christian perspective, for sure, but definitely not the fundamentalist perspective. I'll put it that way. So our podcast is there as well.
Cool. Awesome. Have you ever had Bart Ehrman on, or someone like him?
I'm a big fan of Bart. I read his book, Heaven and Hell. Found it really helpful. I've enjoyed his debate with Daniel Wallace, although I think I would agree with Daniel in some ways. But I like Bart a lot. I want to get him on the show. I have a friend who has a connection to him. He's on my list at some point. Yeah. But yeah, I would love to get Bart on the show. Really, just to hear what he has to say about Christian nationalism. Like, Bart, what do we do? Help me out, So
yeah, that would be a great show.
Yeah, help us, Bart. Yeah. No, I think Bart's great. He's obviously very wise and brilliant, and he really helped me understand that, the Bible how we have it has a long, messy tradition. And we have to just be honest about that instead of pretend that it was beamed down from heaven above when it really wasn't. So,
yeah. Actually, when I told our former pastor that I read Bart Ehrman and I was completely skeptical about everything, he was like, I was hoping you wouldn't have said him. And I was like, why? I'm like, I think everything he said was really good. And he's like, well, I could have given you some resources.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. I was like,
here's John Macarthur. Here's Paul Washer. Here's Matt Chandler. Here's Steve Strobel. Here's Sean McDowell. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I was like, no, that's okay. I wanted to find my own resources.
Man, you invited Satan in with that one.
That's seriously.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's Apostacie. Where can we find your stuff?
Instagram and TikTok, and then here on Wednesdays. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Every Wednesday. You can find me at thebiblesayswhat.com. New episode every week. I'd like to thank today's patrons, Kathy Cotton, Cindy Plaza, Bryce Cornell, Deborah Grace, Sunny Shell, Aaron Coalson, and Phil Calderone. Thank you guys for the support. Don't forget to spay and neuter your pets. We'll see you next week.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.